George Austin really needs no introduction to this group. He served multiple times in multiple chairs, and certainly has been a gift to PPA&M. So with that, George, we really appreciate your program tonight, and I'm going to make you the host.
So, yeah, of course, we're talking about photo pills tonight, and I'm going to do a little shout out to Raphael down here. If you're not familiar with Raphael, he's the YouTube educator for photo pills and one of the creators. And once you start watching him, you'll just fall in love with him. He's just too much fun. And they provide so much information. Almost weekly, they have YouTube videos. And then at least monthly, they do what they call master classes, where they have people from around the world give master classes on photography using photo pills, but that's not the emphasis. It's usually on whatever the photography is. Wonderfully interesting stuff. All that's on YouTube. So photo pills is $9.90 for life, and it works on any phone or tablet. And as I said, wonderful support. When you first open photo pills, you're going to see this very first screen here. And it's got the planner, and then what these are, the sun and the moon. When we click on these, it'll take you to various ways to choose times and places, or times to photograph different phases of the moon, or when the sun is coming up and sun coming down. Now, what this one is, the My Stuff, is stuff that you create. And so we're going to just go ahead and jump on down to that pretty quick here. So when you click on any of those other two, the planner or My Plans, it'll take you to the last place you were, which has a map and this bar across the top. So as I say, so we're in the pills, and we go on the pills, and it's going to take me to the last place I was. So like I said, in this top screen, there's 11 of these things. It would take me more than an hour to tell you about all of these. The main one I'm going to use is this one here, which shows me sun up, sun down, moon down, the times. I don't necessarily use the angles. So that's what I do for planning. And then once you're there, you can put your finger right down here on this little bar. I'm going to put my finger on it, and I'm going to move the time forward and backward. And you can see this. Now, what these dots are, this is the arch of the Milky Way. And this is the galactic core right here. So if we go back in time, we're going to see that's going to disappear because it's not visible. Now, the other things we have is this is on this particular day where the sun is going to come up, where it's going to go down. And this is the moon, where it's going to come up and where it's going to go down.
George, there were 6 lines on that last diagram.
6 lines. Okay, yeah. So there's a light blue, a dark blue, and that's the moon. There's a light yellow and an orange, and that's the sun. And then there's the Milky Way. And you can add other things to it also. So here's how my workflow is. So first I decide, how about a moonrise? So we go to the moonrise, to the calendar. So when you pull up the moon, what I see here is when the moon comes up, when it goes down, tells me the brightness it is, tells me what time the galactic core will come up, tells me what time moonset is, when sunset is. But the one we're going to look at here is this one down here. So when we come to the calendar, we see that we just had the new moon here. Let's go to the next month. See this little circle on number 9, the open circle? That is the dark of the moon. So what that tells me is anywhere in all of this time, I can do a Milky Way without the moon, pretty much. And then here's the full moon. So that's how we use those dates. The sun, more or less the same thing, except that it's just times a day: golden hour, blue hour, nautical twilight, astronomical, what time the galactic is visible. Very, very useful, unbelievable. Exposure. So what exposure is going to tell me here is I'm shooting on a 14 millimeter lens at 2.8, for my nighttime stuff. If I was going to do a daytime thing, let's say I was shooting at 1/25th at f11 and I put an ND with 3 stops of filter, this is going to tell me the change in value, how fast I really need to shoot it. That's what the exposure one does. Quite handy. Depth of field, pretty much 2.8. And you can see depth of field is showing. And if we go to, this is kind of interesting. If I go to the augmented reality, it's going to show me the depth of field and how far out things are and what's in focus. So I think that's it for now until we get to some other things. But you can also see we've got how you can create star trails. And it will just tell you how many angles. There's so much to that. That's a whole different thing. Just to let you know what's possible on this guy.
So is that saying 3 hours will give you that result?
Yes. And then this shows me the subject to distance. This shows what my Canon, the lens I'm using, and then what's going to be in focus. Meteors are actually kind of interesting. You can choose one of these. Like the next one coming up is the Perseid on September. And what it's going to show me down here is what the height of it is, the prime, where the most are going to happen, and what the times are. So that's pretty fascinating. And once, if you click this and the top of those 11 choices to show meteor showers, it'll show you where it's coming from in the sky. So you know how to point your camera if you want to do it that way. So now looking for locations, there's a number of ways to do this. So for me, I'm going to start from the bottom because that's what I love to do the most. And what I love to do is get in the car, drive around, take pictures with my camera. Go back to the planner. So I'm going to go down here to load. I'm going to find a geotagged image. Look at this image right here. So this is the image from the City of Rocks. So from this, I can using that other planner for the dark of the night or a moonrise, I can cycle through this and you'll see this happen. There's the moon coming up kind of early. And then here comes the Milky Way. So that's how you can use that to choose a location.
So to change the time, George, are you sliding something on the picture there?
But right here where this is, you just take your finger and drag it. So I'm dragging my finger on there. That's how I'm doing that. Okay.
And all the little dotted circles, that's the galactic center?
The galactic center is the biggest circle of that group. That would be right there. And it always has this line to show you where the galactics, because that's pointed. And the purpose of that is you want to have this particular crop of rocks. You want it to come right through that slot in the rock or whatever, right on top of the building or whatever. So that's the purpose of that.
So if you use one of the other little globes there, then you're going to have a lesser view of the center?
All the little globes just represent is the shape of the Milky Way, the arch of the Milky Way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's always an arch. And of course, while we're talking about that, if you see the shape of that this time of year, if I go over here, I might as well show how this works. And I go to more and I change the date. And I'm going to go over here to September 15th, say, okay. The arch, how different the arch looks.
Yeah.
That's because that's the time of year when you get vertical Milky Ways.
And you're going to be looking at the horizon on the early end of it here then, huh? That's the biggest circle?
Yeah. So you can see how different that is, and also the time of day. So this is not the time of year where you could do a good arch of Milky Way because it needs to be really low instead of directly over you north to south.
I'm not seeing that overlay on mine. Is that something I have to turn on?
You see the little layered squares next to the plus?
Yes.
Okay, click on that.
Got it.
And then go down, and to turn the Milky Way on, you have to just tap the eye.
one more question. To use a GPS coordinate, you just use your cell phone?
Might be something that has to be turned on in settings.
Ah. So if we go to the camera and I go somewhere else, yeah, the trick is it also has to be somewhere where you can get a signal, because I've run into that a lot. So this is the moonrise I did from of the lake out here. And so we just took that. So the other thing you can, that I should probably talk about, since this little red dot, I'm not actually standing in the middle of the lake. If I put my finger on this red dot, I can move it. And that's what you'll do constantly. In other words, you'll put your finger, you'll move the red dot. And so like what I was trying for, so what I was after was right over the spillway. And so I just kept moving the little red pin until it got there. Well, the other thing you can do is what I do a lot is I'll go to Google Earth and I'll find a spot, zoom in. And actually I did that for the goosenecks before we went there. And I could see this one place where you could pull out for the goosenecks. And so I took the little stick pin they have and you tap it right there. And as soon as you do it, a little box comes up and gives you the exact coordinates of it. I just write that down and then I go into photo pills
And put it in.
and I just put it in. Yeah. And so you just type those numbers in and it goes there. They're not always right, but quite often they'll get close enough that you can then move the red pin.
Where did you get to that where you could enter the latitude and longitude?
Okay, so right down here where it says load, you tap load, and that's where you get all these choices. I'm going to load the Red River plan now. So here's all my different plans I've got and have done. And well, I'm going to show you the gooseneck one. So there's the gooseneck one. So you can see how if I zoom in really tight like this, you can see that place we were standing right there. Yeah, back to north. And so that's how I figured out that on that particular day at 9:17, it was going to be right there, and the core was going to be right on the top of the mountain, the ridge, which it pretty much is.
And there are two abbreviations on the top, DDD and DMS. So what do they mean, and which one do you use?
What it is, George, it's degrees, minutes, seconds, and the other one's decimal degrees, something else.
Right, yeah. I remember I was talking about Milky Way arch. It's like in the spring, it's nice and low like that. And then as you get to now, it's when it rises, it kind of rises up like this. So you can't get that nice big arch because it's just too high in the sky when it rises. But the reason I chose this is we're going to go to the night AIR, and that's going to show me where that arch is going to be.
Okay, but in mine, it does height. You have to enter in a height.
Really?
Where you're going to be, enter the height at which you normally use the device.
Oh, you need to calibrate. So down there, you can see where it says visual calibration. You can't visually calibrate the Milky Way. It's too hard to do because it's already up. So what you do to do that is you just take the phone, and if you see the picture of me over here, and you take it and you make a circle 8 about 4 times like this. And that calibrates it. It more or less lines it up with whatever's going on in the sky. Now, if we go to the daytime one, which is the other one here, you can do the visual calibration, which I can't do because the sun isn't up at the moment. So what you do is you would hold it up to the sun. Let's say that my camera here is All right. And then you would just move that up there until the picture of the sun is right on the sun, and then hit visually calibrate. And that's kind of important to do for the moon rises especially. Though usually just the figure 8 will do it pretty good. And we talked about this earlier, changing the time, you can either put your finger on the screen here and move it back and forth, or you can just on the map, on the visual in AIR, you can move that back and forth in time to see where things are going to be. So now the saving of plans. Now there's some really fun things you can do with this. Oh, I didn't talk about the night AR. Let's go back and do that. So I'm going to go into the AR. Doesn't matter which one. And right down here, you'll see actions. I'm going to touch the actions and you'll see share image or save. If I hit save image, it went away. That should now be in my my pictures on my phone. It's in it straight there. So the other action is the save image, and you can see all the possibilities of how you can save and share. Which you can also, all of us photo pillars, when we're done, Steve, I will share my Red River, the Red River one I created with you, and you can share it with everybody else since you have their email. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody can open it up, look at it, modify it, and share it with everybody else. For the nighttime shooting, we've all heard the rule of 600. That one needs to go in the trash can for sure. You'll get streaky stars every time. So even the rule of 500, which says I'm shooting this Roganon 14 millimeter 2.8 on my 6D Mark II, and all of these things you get to choose in the drop down. So you go find your camera, and then you plug in this information, and you plug in this information, and it tells you what you want. And what you want to use is always the NFC rule. So this tells me that if I'm shooting 14 millimeter at 2.8 at 8 seconds. Now I also shoot at 3600 ISO, which for some reason it just doesn't care. But this is really quick and handy. As a matter of fact, on my camera, one of the permanent settings dials that I have on the C1 dial is set to 2.8, 3200 at 15 seconds and 10-second delay. So I use a loop. This little loop I use for the back of the camera on live view for doing sharp stars, hit sharp and zoom it up and focus manually, of course. But I have to admit that since I started using the sweet Roganon 14 millimeter, I don't do that. I put it on infinity, it's sharp. Now I've got my involumeter here, which you can certainly use your timer or the involumeter in the camera. I tend to use this one. Most of the time when I'm doing these, I'm taking at least about 10 images, and then I edit them in Lightroom and then a little bit, just a little bit. So they're all the same, and then send them to Sequator, which is the PC version of stacking stars. Sequator is the one that Mac people have to pay $28 for. And of course, then I have my camera with photo pills and other things, and my little red flashlight and a headlamp. Over here's my setup, and I'm using the Alan Wallace Z bracket. And the reason I'm using that is for using, when I'm doing my panoramics, I'm doing 10 images each of at least 5 moves, because you have to do a whole 180-degree stitch to do that. And this just works so perfect. I have this little app on my camera that's a bubble leveler, which I just set right on top of this before I put the camera on, and I get it level, spin it around, sure it's level. Then when I lift this up, it all stays level. So here's some fun ones we've done. So this one is the Sakatone moon one I did. shows me the time. And here's the augmented reality image showing the moon getting ready to come up, blend to her camera. And what happened there? This was one of my favorites. I was driving over this bridge and I looked down. I said, "Oh wow, that's neat." So I walked down there and got out my photo pills and said, "I wonder if the Milky Way will do anything interesting." And boy, did it ever. And then about 1.5 miles down the road from that is this tree with the raven's nest in it. So I did this with the arch, but then I went back and did another one. I don't have the image of that with the moon, and did the moon coming up there. This was a fun one. This one didn't quite work out as I planned. This is another app I'll show you. This is a compass app that's really handy too if you want to get longitude, latitude, and all sorts of good information. And it takes a picture and saves it. And so this was the picture I took, but you'll notice it says it has to be at 3:54 in the morning. Well, by 3:54 in the morning, the clouds had moved in. So I didn't quite get this Milky Way here where I wanted it. Now, this is one of the arts. This is one of those, I think this is actually 6 images of 10 each stacked. And then panorama in Lightroom. And that was done from this plan here. And it was pretty darn accurate. And here's the Red River one. So what this is a simulation from Google Earth. So the useful apps I have is this GPS camera is really handy. It's always important to have something like the Windy app here, so you can see if you're going to get clouded out. And this is just a little quick one that you can use, Stellarium, that just kind of shows you where things are in real time. This little outdoor active one is another free one I use that will track you no matter where you are, whether you have phone signal or not. This is the whitewater overlook down into the canyon trip that I did and then back up into here. And it had a little blue dot following me all the way up here. It was just incredible.
George, I have one last question.
Sure.
On the sort of getting panorama, do you stitch them or stack them?
So the first thing I do, like I take 10 images with my involumeter in the very first position, and it doesn't matter where you start from 0 degrees or 180 or 90 or whatever it is, where you're facing north or south first, but you have to start there first. And so my involumeter takes 10 images with a 2-second delay between them. Then I put a flashlight in it, take a picture, and move it 30 degrees on my little Z bracket. There's circle that shows you what degrees are. Move it 30 degrees or 30% overlap, and do that again, and do that for however many times, 5 to 6 times until you get the whole thing. Then I open each set of 10, or actually I open one of them, and I do just a little bit of tweak, and I just go in Lightroom and say, do that to everybody. And then I open the first set of 10, and I export them to a file called Stack 1, and then there's Stack 2, Stack 3. Then I open up Sequator, and in Sequator, I'll open up Stack 1, and that's a whole thing. We'll have to talk about how you use Sequator. And it basically stacks and gets rid of the noise, a lot of the noise. And I do that to each of those. And in each one of those, there will be a file that you name that will be Stack 1 image or something, or whatever you want to call it. Then in Lightroom, I take those 5 to 6 images that are stacked, and I go into the panoramic merge in Lightroom and merge them together. And then once that's done, that's basically the final, and then you do all your other edits.
George, anything else you want to say?
no, just get out and play with it and learn with it. But really, seriously, do go to the YouTube. And also, don't forget to, if you haven't already, on your computer, download the 256-page book, because that's just so much help. And what happens with that, you click on it and it goes to YouTube's too. And the YouTubes are just so easy to understand. Raphael does such a wonderful job.
I think this was, I agree with Steve. George made this look really easy, and I'm sure it's not that easy. So you're going to be tech support now, George. So get ready. But, but thank you. It was very, very useful information.